Okay, so we're going to do the Fang Reliquary figure, a wall plaque from Oba's Palace, and a veranda post. Um, so what you'll notice immediately from these three works is that we're not dealing with pieces that are interested in offering naturalistic depictions of the human body, right? We have this work, and if you look at it, obviously it should suggest something kind of like a baby, right? Kind of the proportions are not in line with naturalistic proportions. We have this umbilical cord here. We have this big head, right? We clearly have a lot of hierarchical scale going on here. And in this piece, we have also, it's not actually hierarchical scale in this piece. When you learn a bit more about it, you'll see why it's not entirely hierarchical. We have this woman with extremely long neck. So we are, and obviously smaller people here, which are hierarchical. In the vast majority, I think actually all the artworks that we have from our study of Africa, that we're not going to be dealing with naturalistic proportions. Other ideas are emphasized in the depiction of the human body, primarily symbolic ideas. So what does it mean for this woman to have a very long neck? What does it mean for this figure to have this very large head, and look kind of like a baby, a baby with those chubby arms, right? So we want to keep that in mind because there are reasons for all of these things. Okay, so those are our three works. Setting my timer. Sorry, should have done this before. Okay, so if we look at this, you should be reminded of an infant, or we have an extremely large head, right? So you want to think about, okay, so babies have very large heads, that's true, but what might also a large head tend to suggest, right? Think about that. We have clearly a very stylized haircut, right? And the emphasis here on both an umbilical cord, right? So think about, okay, so what umbilical cord, what does an umbilical cord do? What's it about? We also clearly, male gender here, right? And if we look at the way it's, the body's put together, we'll see that the thighs here are kind of are horizontal to the ground, or perpendicular to the ground rather. So this is actually designed, you want to think, okay, so this wouldn't really actually be able to stand up by itself. So it must have been placed on something, right? This is being aided in standing up, but it couldn't stand up by itself. It would have to be placed on something or use something to have it stay upright, okay? So this is a reliquary figure. It's from the Fang peoples. All right. So remember, okay, so Southern Cameroon, but remember, we're dealing with cultures, not countries here for the most part. Okay. So clearly stylized, as I've mentioned already before, very symmetrical, right? There's absolutely no difference between the left side and the right side. Proportions clearly emphasize the head. Obviously reminiscent of an infant with the umbilical cord there, and the proportions as well. They are in fact guardian figures. So it's not actually supposed to be a baby. It is a figure that guards a reliquary. Okay, it guards a reliquary, of course, which is where remains are left. So it guards reliquaries of ancestors. So the remains of ancestors that were kept in these kind of boxes. So these figures are there to keep uninitiated boys and women from looking at the remains of the ancestors, because that would be a dishonorable thing. So it sits on the edge of the box that contains the bones, right? And so to protect the ancestral spirits, you'll see over and over again in our study of in Africa, the focus on, not in every work, but a repeated focus in many works on honoring the ancestors, being in touch with the ancestors is really important. And so we want to think about the fact that it does kind of look like an infant, and the fact that it's guarding the bones of ancestors. So there's something suggestive here about the cycle of life, right? Beginnings and endings, right? Because we do have this large head, which also maybe, probably you thought, maybe it suggests great wisdom or great knowledge, right? So there's this nice bringing together of both at the beginning of life and the end of life with what these figures are involved in. As soon as you saw the word reliquary, you should have thought of this. You should have thought of this, right? Which, of course, is the reliquary of Saint Foy, contained, actually, the piece itself actually contained part of the skull, right, of the child martyr. Okay, so when we look at our reliquary figure from the Fang reliquary figure, what's emphasized through the proportions and of the piece, and specifically, the size of the head, et cetera, are virtues that the Fang people admired. So in some ways, you could say this is an idealized portrait of not how somebody would look, but how somebody's character would be. So it kind of suggests the ideal character of someone. The piece is obviously supposed to suggest both tranquility, but also strength, right? The eyes are closed, but it also has these kind of maybe imposing. I mean, they're out of proportion to the torso, but the arms could be considered muscular. And so the idea here is that it's a piece that emphasizes holding opposites in balance, which would have been a desired ability. And as I've already mentioned, it guards the relics of ancestors, and to keep it from being looked at by women and uninitiated boys. The pieces were also used in initiation rituals of young men, right? So that they could initiation rituals that brought them into manhood. The pieces were also used in some of those ceremonies as well. All right, and so there is a video which I am attaching to this assignment. So make sure to watch the video because it's Khan Academy, which you know it's good.